My wife tried to block my bullied son from moving back home and said he's not really family. Then she admitted she's been jealous of him all along. Naturally, my son James is a teenager, and like most teenagers, he's online constantly. I don't want him stumbling across this and recognizing himself. James is 17. His mother, Laura, 38, and I, 39, were never a serious couple. We were both young, barely out of high school ourselves. It was a brief relationship, but it resulted in James. We've always co-parented successfully, no court battles, no custody disputes, just two people who respect each other and want what's best for our son. We're not friends exactly, but we're friendly. Laura's a genuinely good person, and she later married Tom, 40. I married Sarah, 33, and have now been married to her for 5 years. We have a daughter, Emma, who's just turned 2. For the last 3 years, James has been living in Quebec, Canada, with Laura and Tom. Tom is an engineer, and he got an incredible job offer there, a real career maker. It was a great opportunity for the whole family, and it seemed like a good experience for James. Better schools, a chance to learn French, a broader worldview. I agreed to it, even though the thought of him being so far away was incredibly difficult. We video called regularly, at least twice a week, and I flew up to visit a few times a year whenever my work schedule and finances allowed. But it wasn't the same as having him here. Recently, James called. He didn't sound like himself. He described the other kids at his new school. They latched onto his American accent. He said they'd repeat everything he said in an exaggerated, drawn-out way. He told me a story about a girl in his English class who kept calling him Tex, even though he's never even been to Texas. He corrected her multiple times, but she just kept doing it. He talked about trying to join a pickup basketball game at lunch. The other kids just ignored him, passed the ball around him like he wasn't there. He eventually just walked away. He detailed another instance. This one was about a group project in his history class. He was assigned to work with 3 other students. They met once briefly, and then he didn't hear from them again. He tried emailing them, texting them, but got no response. On the day of the presentation, he showed up to class ready to do his part, but the other students acted like he wasn't there. They presented the entire project without him, leaving him standing awkwardly at the front of the room. The teacher said nothing. James said he felt like a museum exhibit, something to be stared at, but not engaged with. He told me about the hours he spent trying to translate his homework. He said he had to look up so many words in his French language textbooks that it took him twice as long to do his assignments as it should have. He said he felt completely isolated. Laura and I had a long conversation. We both agreed James needed to come home. His old bedroom, the one he'd had since he was a little kid, is now my workshop. I build model airplanes. It's a hobby I picked up a few years ago. I have a workbench, tools, shelves full of supplies, but that's all manageable. I can move everything to the garage. It'll be cramped, but it's doable. I brought up the subject with my wife, Sarah. Sarah and James have met in person a handful of times. Once at our wedding, I paid for James and Laura to fly out for it, and a couple of other times when James came to visit during his summer breaks. They don't have a close relationship. They talk occasionally on video calls, usually on birthdays or holidays. It's always polite, surface-level conversation. I thought Sarah would be understanding. I'd mentioned months ago that there was a possibility of James returning someday. It wasn't a definite plan, but I brought it up. Her reaction then had been non-committal, but when I told her James was coming home, she just stared at me blankly. She was sitting at the kitchen table, feeding Emma mashed bananas. Emma had banana all over her face. Sarah said, "He can't live here. We don't even know him. He's practically a stranger," I said firmly. "He's my son. He's family." Sarah looked down at Emma, who was happily smearing banana on the tray of her high chair. She said, "Emma is your family. I'm your family. We're your family here. We barely know James." Then she said something that really stung. She said, "Emma doesn't even know he's her brother. She wouldn't understand." I replied, He is her brother, whether she understands it or not. Sarah shook her head, a small, tight movement. Not really. They've never lived together. They don't have any shared experiences. They're strangers to each other. The conversation escalated. It became an argument. I told her that James would always come first, that my loyalty to him was absolute. She said she was scared. She'd never been a stepmother. She didn't know how to interact with a teenager, especially one she barely knew. She said she was worried about how it would affect Emma. I told her that I would be primarily responsible for James. I'd raised him alone for years before Laura and Tom moved. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't expecting her to be his mother, I just expected her to be respectful. Then, in the heat of the moment, I said something I regretted. I told Sarah that if she couldn't accept James, if she couldn't make him feel welcome in our home, then she could go stay at her sister's place. Her sister lives about an hour away in the next town over. Sarah went silent. She stopped feeding Emma. She just stared at me, her face pale. She hasn't said a word about James coming home since. She's still here, but she avoids me as much as possible. She keeps Emma close to her, almost protectively. The atmosphere in the house is tense. I know I'm bringing James back. It's not even a question. He needs to be here. But I don't know how to repair the damage I've done with Sarah. Edit 1. I mentioned to Sarah a while back, maybe a year ago, that James might come back someday. It depended on how things went in Canada. She said to me that she thought he would stay there forever. I think because Laura was very successful with her new life, and James would have more opportunities. Edit 2. I appreciate all the advice and support I've received. Thank you! Update 1. I deleted the original post. I started getting some really disturbing private messages. Some weirdo kept spamming me with hateful comments, making accusations, saying things about my son that I won't repeat. It was unsettling. I don't want to risk getting my account banned. Let me clarify a few things. I live in a small town in the Midwest. It's not a wealthy area. Good jobs are hard to come by. That's why Tom's job opportunity in Canada was such a big deal. It was a significant step up for him and Laura. It's also why I couldn't afford to visit James as often as I wanted to. Plane tickets, especially international ones, are expensive. I agreed to let James go to Canada because, at the time, it seemed like the best thing for him, a better education, a chance to experience a different culture, a fresh start. I thought I was making a responsible, selfless decision. After that awful fight with Sarah, I knew I had handled things badly. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I definitely shouldn't have told her to leave our home. The next morning, I apologized. I told her I was sorry for the way I had spoken to her, that I had been out of line. But I also reiterated that James was coming home, and that was non-negotiable. She apologized, too. She said it was cruel of her to say that Emma and James weren't siblings. She admitted that she had been insensitive. I told her one understood that she was apprehensive, that this was a big change, but that James's return was happening. I have a legal right to bring him home. We have a 50-50 custody agreement with Laura, but more than that, I have a moral obligation to my son. I used a hypothetical situation. I said, imagine if we got divorced and you remarried. Wouldn't you want your new husband to accept Emma, to treat her as his own? James needs a home, and he needs his family. I asked her point blank why she seemed to actively dislike my son, and that's when she finally admitted it. She's jealous. She confessed that she's always felt a twinge of jealousy towards James. It started to make sense. I remembered little things, like the time I bought James a new laptop for school. It wasn't a top-of-the-line model, but it was decent, and Sarah made a comment about how much it cost, even though we could comfortably afford it. Or the time I spent several hours on a video call with James, helping him troubleshoot a problem with his computer, and Sarah kept interrupting, asking me to do chores around the house, even though they weren't urgent. Sarah said she was afraid that I would devote all my attention to James and that I would neglect Emma, that I wouldn't have time for her or for our daughter. I reassured her that I could love both of my children equally, that I could be a good father to both James and Emma. She said she knew it was irrational, that it was wrong to be jealous of a teenager. We agreed to seek professional help. We found a family therapist who has experience with blended families. We have our first appointment scheduled for next week. The therapist suggested a plan. First, we'd have a few sessions together. Then Sarah and I would each have individual sessions. And finally, we'd have sessions with the whole family, including James and Emma, once James was settled in. I told Sarah very clearly that James needed to feel welcome in our home. He needed to feel loved and accepted, not like an intruder. She said she understood. She said she loved me, and she didn't want our marriage to fall apart. She said she wanted to make this work. I told her I didn't want to end our marriage either. I love her, but I also made it absolutely clear, if she mistreats James, if she makes him feel unwelcome or unloved, that will be the end of our relationship. I haven't told James the exact date of his return yet. My psychologist advised me to proceed slowly, to give Sarah and James time to build some sort of connection before he moves in. They've been talking more frequently. Sarah even started watching a cartoon series that James recommended, Steven Universe. They discuss the episodes, the characters, the plot twists. It seems like they're finding some common ground. I suggested to Sarah a couple of days ago to play a video game with James, thinking that it could be a way to bond the one that James and I used to play together. I told her to try Portal 2 first, a game where they would need to work together to win. James agreed to play with her almost immediately. A lot of people in the comments on my original post suggested divorce. That's a drastic step, and it's not something I'm willing to consider lightly. We're married. We have a young daughter. We've built a life together. We're adults. We communicate. We try to resolve our problems instead of immediately resorting to the nuclear option. Sarah has never been abusive or cruel to James. She's never met him that much. He has a very strong personality. He will defend himself. I don't want him babysitting. Emma is too young. Edit. I've seen some comments speculating that Sarah made her own post on this site. That's not true. I have no idea where that rumor came from, and those bots are still trying to message me. It's incredibly annoying. Update 2. James and Sarah's relationship is improving. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better. They've been video calling almost every day now. They're not just talking about Steven Universe anymore either. They even watch the movie together remotely using one of those video sharing apps. Sarah suggested Spirited Away, a Japanese animated film. They have some running joke now about a character called No Face. I feel a bit left out, if I'm being honest, but it's a good thing that they're connecting. It also makes me realize how much James and I have drifted apart. Sarah and I had our first therapy session. It was intense, but productive. The therapist helped us to communicate more openly and honestly. Sarah has also apologized to James directly. She called him a few days ago. Sarah told him that she had been jealous of him and the attention I gave him. She said she was worried that I would prioritize him over her and Emma. She said she felt like she was competing for my attention, and it made her feel insecure and resentful. She told him she was sorry for her behavior and for any hurt she had caused him. James accepted her apology. They had a private conversation after that, just the two of them. I didn't eavesdrop. I don't know exactly what they talked about, but they seemed closer afterward, more at ease with each other. I keep getting asked if I had discussed James's potential return with Sarah before making any concrete plans. Yes, I did. We talked about it in a general, hypothetical way a long time ago, maybe a year or so ago. I also want to reiterate again that Laura and I were never a serious, long-term couple. We were young and irresponsible, and our relationship didn't last. Sarah is actively involved in getting James's room ready. We're painting it blue, his favorite color. We bought new bedding and some posters he picked out online. Emma is helping too, in her own toddler way. She likes to paint with a dry brush, and she keeps trying to help me assemble the new furniture. It's chaotic, but it's also kind of sweet. We haven't set a firm date for James's arrival yet. There are still some logistical details to work out, like transferring his school records and arranging for his belongings to be shipped. Update 3. James has been living with us for a month now. It's been an adjustment for all of us, but a good one overall. He and Sarah are doing well. They're not best friends, but they're friendly, respectful, and even affectionate at times. Emma absolutely adores him. She follows him around everywhere, calling him Jaja, which is her version of James. She constantly wants him to play with her, read to her, or just hold her. Sarah has really made an effort. She was genuinely excited to pick him up from the airport. She even made a welcome home sign with Emma's help. Of course, it was mostly scribbles, but it was the thought that counted. Her jealousy seems to have subsided significantly. She's still attending individual therapy sessions just to work through any remaining issues, but she's made remarkable progress. James hasn't started school yet. We decided to enroll him in the local high school for the next academic year, which starts in the fall. We brought him home sooner than originally planned because we found some significantly cheaper plane tickets. It was actually Sarah's idea to bring him home early. She said she was ready, and she thought it would be good for him to have some time to settle in before school started. James lived in Quebec City, in the French-speaking part of Canada. He had a very difficult time adjusting to the culture and the language. The bullying he experienced was worse than I initially understood. It wasn't just occasional teasing. It was constant, relentless, and often cruel. He was made to feel like an outsider. He's still readjusting to being back in the States. He misses Laura, of course, but they talk on the phone or video call every day. I've been spending as much time with him as possible, helping him reconnect with old friends and get reacquainted with the town. He's met some of Sarah's extended family, her parents, her siblings, and their kids. He seems to be fitting in well. Sarah and I are in a good place. We're communicating more openly and honestly than ever before. We talk about everything, even the difficult, uncomfortable topics. I told her recently about how I've been having these recurring thoughts, almost like anxieties, about what would have happened if I hadn't stood my ground, if I had given in to her initial resistance. She said she understood and that those thoughts were natural. I love Sarah. I believe she's a fundamentally good person who made a mistake driven by fear and insecurity. She's actively working on becoming a better person, a better wife, and a better stepmother. She is getting better. Our relationship is strong. It's based on friendship, respect, and a willingness to work through our problems. My relationship with James is evolving. He's not a little boy anymore. He's becoming a young man. He doesn't need me in the same way he used to. He's more independent, more self-sufficient. I know this update is probably anticlimactic for some of you. A lot of people were probably expecting a dramatic confrontation, a messy divorce, a huge blow-up. But that's not how real life usually works.